Hello maths fans. In this tutorial we're going to look at area of a triangle. Bit of prior knowledge. We need to know how to find the area of a rectangle, or hopefully you already know the area of a rectangle. Some people write it as length times width. Some people write it as base times height. Base times height. So in this case it would simply be 6 multiplied by 2 is 12. And it's an area, so centimetres squared. Length times width, or base times height. Called the base, this kind of, imagine putting it on the floor, the one that's on the floor, and the height. Doesn't matter which order we do that in, we just multiply the two lengths. Base times height. Now, that same formula can be applied to a parallelogram. Just have to be very careful that you choose the right base and height. And what we say is that the base and height need to be perpendicular. Now, perpendicular means they cross at right angles. So in this case, it's the 3 and the 10. They are the perpendicular base and height. Base times perpendicular height. So here it would just be 10 multiplied by 3, which is 30. And it's an area, so centimetres squared. So either a rectangle or a parallelogram is base times height. The reason it works for a parallelogram, little diagram for you. If I take that triangle off one end, put it on the other, you can see it just makes a rectangle that is 10 by 3. Okay, on to triangles then. So here we have a triangle, and you can see that this particular triangle would be very easy to turn into a rectangle. So if I think about the rectangle here, that one, 5 by 8 rectangle, that area would be 5 times 8, which is 40 centimetres squared. Well, we don't have the full rectangle, we've just got the triangle. So if the full rectangle there, if I imagine that whole thing is 40, well, I've just chopped it in half, haven't I? So what I've got to do is 5 times 8, and then chop it in half, divide it by 2. That's all you do. For a triangle, work out the area, imagine there's a rectangle, work out that, and then divide by 2. Okay? So in this case, 5 times 8 is 40, 40 divided by 2 is 20 centimetres squared. Let's put that into a formula. So if there's my base and height for the rectangle, well, for my triangle, it's going to be the base times the height, divide it by 2. Chop it in half, divide by 2. That's it. Area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. For any triangle, this works. Base times height divided by 2. Some people will also write it as half times the base times the height, because halving is the same as dividing by 2. These are the same thing. Okay, they are equivalent. All right. So base times height divided by 2, or half base times height. Those are the formulas. If you don't know those yet, write those down, put a big bubble around them, remember them. Very useful. So many people do area of a triangle and they forget this divide by 2 or the half. So either formula, pick one, use it. Just to sort of demonstrate that that works, is true for all triangles, this one, not as easy to turn into a rectangle, but if you imagine me doing that, I could make it a rectangle, and you can see that I've got kind of half of this bit, half of this bit, so it is half of that base times height there, but I could also demonstrate that by turning it into a parallelogram. If you imagine that parallelogram with the base times height for the area, if I chop that in half to make the triangle, I've got half the area of the parallelogram. Lots of little demonstrations of why this formula works. So, looking at our formula then, what we do need to make sure we're doing is that we're not just doing any two lengths, we are taking the base and we are taking the perpendicular height. So, if I had a length over here, wouldn't use it. It's not perpendicular. There and there, base and height, perpendicular lengths, multiply them and then half it. Let's get to some examples, shall we? Here's one, and we're going to use that formula, base times height divided by 2. Well, my base is 10, my height is 3. So what am I going to do? 10 times 3 divided by 2. And that is 30 divided by 2, which is 15. And once again, it's an area, so centimetres squared. That's it. Base times height, divide by 2. One for you to try. Pause the video, see if you can work out the area, and then I'll show you the answer in a second. So pause it now, and here's your answer. So base times height, divide by 2, easy. 9 times 4 is 36, divide by 2 is 18. There it is, 18 centimetres squared. One thing to note, that last one, 9 times 4, divide by 2, even if we had another length labelled, this one, because it's not perpendicular, that's not a right angle. We can ignore it. So just select the important information. We want a base and a perpendicular height. That 11, it's there, it's just information we don't need for the area. Base times perpendicular height. Okay, here's 4 examples for you to try now. See if you've got the hang of this. So definitely pause the video now, have a go at these 4 questions, and I'll give you the answers in a second. So pause it, and on we go to the answers. Right, the first one there, 6 times 5 divided by 2, 15. Doesn't matter if it's upside down, back to front, we've still got perpendicular lengths. Multiply them together and half it. Call this one number 2. Base times height divided by 2. Pretty straightforward. Down here we've got 3 lengths and we've got to select the ones that are at right angles. Not so easy to spot here, but here the useless information was the 25. Well, useless for area. The key information was the 12 and the 20. So for this one it was 12 times 20, then divide by 2, and we got 120 centimetres squared. And then the last one there, we've got a base, a perpendicular height, don't need that one. 4 times 6 divided by 2 gave me 12 centimetres squared. There we go, hope you learnt something from that. Area of a triangle, done.